Severe weather is back in the forecast again. We have a growing threat of damaging winds, large hail, and even tornado potential over the next few days as energy streams back into the country. We have a rather significant threat of damaging winds and some large hail today across portions of the northern plains, but this is only the beginning of an extended stretch of more active weather. Some more widespread severe weather outbreaks will be possible going into Tuesday, Wednesday, and the later parts of this week. You can see in the extended forecast you have a lot of activity, a lot of things going on that you'll want to be paying attention to stay safe out there. Today is Sunday, June 7th, and in the weather world today we'll break down all the details and look a little bit deeper into the future as to what the weather may bring. Starting off, it's always a good idea to look at the jet stream. These are just ribbons of fast moving air several thousand feet above our heads in the atmosphere, and this gives a good signal of the weather patterns across the country. The biggest thing to note, the jet stream will be generally staying across the northern US over the next few days. I talked about this in my last video, but the jet stream migrates to the north as summer progresses. This happens every year. Areas of low pressure and storms ride along the jet stream, so this further north jet streams means that our severe weather will be concentrated further to the north than what we've been seeing. So you can see we have some pretty strong jet stream winds, especially across the Dakotas, Minnesota. This is kind of the highlight zone of severe weather over the next few days, especially with any troughs that become negatively tilted, where we have a trough axis oriented from northwest to southeast. That's what we'll be watching for over the next few days, and that's really going to drive our severe weather concerns. Now zooming in a little more specifically, this is just a jet stream for today. We're going to have a pretty strong area of upper level winds develop across Montana and just to the west of the Dakotas. So this jet stream of all this fast moving air in the atmosphere, this is going to create a lot of lift, a lot of ventilation, and a lot of energy for storms. And this is why we have a pretty significant severe weather risk today, highlighting the winds. All the strong upper level winds in the upper atmosphere will be translated down to the surface in some of these storms and bring the potential for some destructive wind gusts. So here we go, we have an enhanced risk of severe weather for western North Dakota, northwestern South Dakota, portions of Montana, and Wyoming. So this orange shade, that's a level 3 out of 5. That's fairly significant. We don't see that every day, so we definitely want to be paying attention for some higher end severe weather possible. But even in the yellow and green shades, scattered to isolated severe storms are possible. We also have a few other areas. We have a small marginal risk along the mid-Atlantic, so isolated severe storms possible there, and then a slightly larger marginal to even slight risk across portions of the Arklatex up north into Missouri. Zooming back in though to the northern plains, this is definitely the biggest area. Notice the wind risk is really what's driving our enhanced risk, especially in this double hatched area, SIG 2 intensity winds. This is where not only strong winds of 60 miles per hour, but potentially damaging to destructive winds upwards of 75 miles per hour are possible in this region. But even in this general region, winds up to 75 miles per hour could definitely prove damaging. So we want to watch out for some higher end wind damage in this region. Playing the model out, let's first focus on the northern plains before we move to other portions of the country. Starting off, we're actually going to have some snow still, believe it or not, in portions of western Montana and the very high elevations of the mountains. Not really anywhere close to the surface. Our storms will start firing around 4 or 5 o'clock. So just as we're nearing sunset, this is when some of these initial storms will form with gusty winds and large hail. Now initially storms will have a bigger hail threat, but it does look like a line will develop pretty quickly, and this line could have some particularly nasty winds, and it'll be pretty fast moving up to the northeast. So Montana, you'll be first, but then this will transition into North Dakota. Any of these storms ahead of the main line, this is kind of where the hail threat is biggest, so definitely a good idea to move your car indoors. But this main line of storms right here, it looks pretty nasty to me for some gusty winds, some particularly sustained damaging winds. So bring the trampolines inside. The trampolines might go flying, yard furniture might go flying, and just batten down the hatches in this region as this round of storms comes through. This is now 8 o'clock moving into North Dakota, and then it'll very quickly race to the east. Something about these storms is they'll be very, very fast moving, and that's kind of accompanying with this gusty wind threat. Storms will slowly be weakening as the night progresses into North Dakota, but still some gusty winds, some heavy rain possible, and everything kind of fizzles down to just an area of general showers as we wake up on Monday morning. So that's the main risk up to the north. It'll be quick moving, but when it does hit, it'll be pretty intense. Now moving a little bit further to the south, the Dakotas won't be the only ones with rain. Look at this just broad area of some general showers and storms. We have a lot of moisture. We have an upper level low that'll be lifting to the north, providing a lot of lift and energy. Most of these storms will just be garden variety showers, storms, so maybe washing out some of your Sunday plans, unfortunately. In terms of severe weather, we're really talking about this corridor from Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. This is kind of that marginal to very small slight risk. Damaging winds and large hail, that's kind of the main concern here, especially hail. Any severe weather would be pretty isolated, but still want to watch out for that. that if you're out and about. Definitely have a backup plan indoors. So that's today's risk. Tomorrow's risk is a little bit more muted. We have a slight risk of severe weather across portions of the Rockies into the plains, so southwest Nebraska, northeast Colorado, but some other larger areas of marginal risk, one just to the south of St. Louis. This larger marginal risk that the slight risk is embedded in the plains, and then another risk in Montana and North Dakota. Not a big severe weather day, but just isolated instances of large hail damaging winds possible, maybe an isolated tornado. These are kind of the pop-up summer thunderstorms that are very hard to predict, but could very quickly bring some gusty winds. So tracking tomorrow out on radar, we're going to wake up to a lot of storms and showers over Minnesota, Iowa, and even another complex possible further down into Kansas and Missouri. Gusty winds are possible in some of these, especially this complex further to the south. I'll be watching some of that activity for maybe some slightly more concentrated severe weather. As the day progresses though, this massive rain and showers will all be moving to the east. So Chicago, all the way down Tennessee, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Illinois, this whole corridor here, watch out for a pretty wet Monday, especially as the storms propagate further to the east. And then we'll be watching for some storm redevelopment across the Rockies, especially as we get into 7 and 8 o'clock. Notice we could have a few supercells. The signal isn't looking too strong for a widespread severe weather day, but any of these cells that form could definitely contain some large hail, gusty winds, and maybe even a slightly higher tornado risk across this portion of the plains. So 2 areas of wet weather, this large blob of general rain, isolated flooding, isolated severe weather possible, and this slightly more concentrated area of stronger severe weather possible in the Rockies, which could grow upscale a little bit into a bigger complex as it moves toward Nebraska. This is only one computer model, but definitely something we're watching out for. Now, we do have severe weather today and tomorrow, but this is only the beginning of a broader stretch of severe weather that is really catching my attention as we get to the middle parts of the week. So this is the weather pattern. This shows the area of high pressures and low pressure. This blue here, this is a big trough of low pressure that's really associated with that dip in the jet stream that I was showing you earlier. Something I want to point out is this trough of low pressure will be crossing the northern plains as we go later into the week, and it's going to be very sharp as it does so. The trough axis here is going to be very sharp and turn negatively tilted, especially Wednesday, Thursday. Especially just this big contrast between this area of low pressure and the areas of high pressure around. It's going to be a pretty vigorous and potent trough when it does cross, and that's going to bring a few days of potential severe weather outbreak. So day 3, Tuesday, we already have an enhanced risk of severe weather across North Dakota into portions of northern South Dakota, and the broader slight risk, which includes Grand Forks, Fargo, Sioux Falls. The marginal risk extends all the way down to Kansas and does include Minneapolis. An enhanced risk 3 days out is pretty significant, and it means the Storm Prediction Center is already pretty confident there'll be severe weather, and as we get closer, I imagine confidence will only increase. So we have plenty of lead time for this, preparing for potentially significant severe weather Tuesday, and especially Tuesday evening. That kind of looks like the main zone. But it doesn't stop there. Look beyond this. Now we're getting into Wednesday. We have a day 4 of 30% enhanced risk of severe weather, moving a little bit further east. So now targeting Minneapolis into portions of western Wisconsin, northern Iowa, and a broader slight risk which includes most of Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and northern Missouri. So especially in this orange shade, 30% risk of severe weather on your day 4 outlook. Storm Prediction Center doesn't issue that lightly. That means once again there's high confidence already in severe weather, and as we get closer, as models become more convergent on the solution, confidence will only increase and potential impacts will likely only increase. So this is definitely a day I'm watching for potential intense severe weather outbreak level storms in this region. Once again, we have plenty of heads up, plenty more time as we get closer to sort out the details, but just in terms of the categories, this would definitely be a day I wouldn't be surprised if we get a moderate risk as we get closer, and one of the more significant severe weather days of the year. Even on Thursday though, day 5, we have a 15% risk, now moving a little further to the southeast. Chicago just to the west of Detroit, Illinois, Indiana, St. Louis is also included in this. So we get the picture that we're in a more active weather, at least for the middle part of the week, focusing more on the northern plains. So just breezing through the potential rain for this week. It is summer, so it's very hard to predict severe weather and storms that many days in advance. There are just so many different features in the atmosphere that could contribute to storms. But we're noticing on Tuesday, this is an enhanced risk of severe weather across the Dakotas and Nebraska, especially damaging winds, but some tornadoes are possible. Now on Wednesday, notice across Minnesota and Wisconsin, where I'm kind of circling with my cursor, this is why we have that 30% chance, because models are pretty bullish this far out on some pretty strong storms. Even Thursday though, now further to the southeast, this is why Chicago down towards St. Louis, portions of the Midwest is included in that severe weather risk. Very active and stormy weather pattern for portions of the northern plains for sure over the next week. Now that's our biggest story, the severe weather concerns, but we do have a few other stories I want to briefly touch on before we go. This map here, this shows the fire danger. So we have a pretty significant area of fire danger across portions of the Rockies into the western US. We have some pretty dry air combining with some gusty winds. winds. This means that any fire that starts could pretty quickly spread. So just staying weather aware, limiting anything that could potentially spark a fire. Also on your day tomorrow, a pretty big critical risk of fire in this red zone across many of the same areas. So we have red flag warnings in place, just making sure we're heeding those warnings and paying attention. Now, I also talked about this in the last video, but we also have a lot of heat moving into the US over the next week. One other side effect of the jet stream moving up further to the north is that it allows a lot of heat and warm air to compile in from the south. So not only is it going to be hot, it's going to be humid, and that's going to push up our feels like temperature. This map here shows the feels like temperature, and notice as I've just breezed through the week, some of the afternoon temperatures in St. Louis all the way up to Detroit, we could be dealing with the middle to upper 90s, even near 100-degree heat indices. One of the first big heat waves of the season for sure, taking much of the central and eastern US, making sure we're taking those heat safety precautions, not underestimating the heat, because it's going to get hot for a lot of us up till the weekend. Then we could get a pattern change and maybe some cooler air will start filtering in, especially across portions of the north. And finally, the last kind of miscellaneous story we have is looking out to the tropics. We have some activity developing. First off, we have Amanda out here in the open waters of the Pacific. It has weakened to a tropical depression since the last video, and it will weaken further to a remnant low. So fish storm going to impact no one. Further to land though, off the coast of Mexico, we have newly formed Tropical Depression 2E. This is expected to briefly strengthen into a tropical storm. It would become Tropical Storm Boris when it does so and make landfall across portions of Mexico. The biggest risk for this is just heavy rain. We have a lot of heavy rain already moving in this region, a lot more. We could also have some gusty winds though, so something we're watching. If you know any family out here, definitely make sure they're paying attention to this system. Further down to the south though, we have another area of agitated weather that is expected to develop. It's likely to develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm. This one is a little bit more uncertain, but it's likely to parallel the coast and move to the northwest over the next few days. Right now, it doesn't look like it'll make landfall along El Salvador or Guatemala, but even just a track close by could bring a lot of heavy rain to the coast. Central America definitely dealing with some tropical threats over the next few days, a lot of heavy rain, maybe some gusty winds. Further to the east in the Atlantic, so far we have nothing waking up, no areas of potential development. That'll change as we go deeper into the season, but most of the activity right now is in the Pacific. So yeah, that's all for the world of weather for today. A lot of different things we're tracking. Definitely that severe weather risk over the next few days is the main concern. Today across the northern plains, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, those are back-to-back days of active severe weather where severe weather outbreaks could be possible. Definitely something I'm watching closely. I'll have a lot more updates as we get closer, so consider subscribing if you don't want to miss any of that. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.